actually do have one question, Kristen, and forgive me if you mentioned this earlier, but is apathy a symptom of burnout? Like where you just feel like you don't really care about what you're doing anymore? And I don't feel like this, just to be clear, guys.
Yeah,
I feel
no,
great.
Libby's
But
fine. Yes.
just feeling like you don't it things that you were excited about doing, work that you were doing, you don't even care what the outcome is. You're just
Yes.
okay.
Yes, 100% Libby. And I'm glad you brought that up because it goes back to limited joy and limited fun. It is, somebody described it as having scotch tape on the end of your fingers. I can still move things, but it's not the same sensation of feeling them. You're functional, but you're not alive as much. You have less enjoyment from the things that used to bring you enjoyment. You have less anticipatory excitement, kind of like, oh, we're going to my favorite restaurant versus not even really hungry. So it can really be muted. Doesn't have to necessarily be an absence. And some of that apathy also comes to less empathy for others as well. Certainly for ourselves, but that empathetic decrease really is also another signal that shows up in some. So great ad there. A couple of the elements here, and again, not trying to get micro solutions, but thought bubbles is, and it really ties to your question too on the apathy. There is a distance between what fun feels like. And I'm going to go to Mark and his drums. So if it's been 2, 3, 4 weeks, and not only have you not had the desire, but you haven't made the time to do that, it is that removal of what brings you joy. That element of when was the last time I laughed out loud? When was the last time I listened to music that wasn't piped in from the coffee shop? You start seeing the absence of things that used to be elements of who you are in your senses before. And one of the elements that a few of us have done from another exercise is getting blank index like playing cards and writing down what are the things that are fun because that is a very hard question for adults. You ask a young person what they do for fun, they're like, "What don't I do for fun?" Like everything is fun. Carrots up my nose is fun. And but you get to and feel free to try that too. But with adults, one of the stressful questions they did a study that said, what are some stressful things? And somebody said, being asked what my hobbies are. I feel like I have to hurry up and have hobbies. I have to create something and sell it on Etsy. And those are the components back to what Libby was saying of like, even the thought of having fun is stressful. And so what are those elements and baby steps of fun of what is that one song that I used to sing out loud to? But really starting to recognize what has been removed. The other thing in the first do no harm is space. And we're going to get to this in a moment too. But a lot of it is being able to say, where can you put on the out of office notice in your life until you can have more ability to regulate? You're gonna go slower. It's like walking through water. And that's the first do no harm of being able to say, I'm slower right now. And even if I can normally do things at 150%, 50% is a good day. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But those proactive elements of, hey, I'm going to be working on this next week. You'll get this from me on Friday. Starting to give buffers, even if you might not need it. That becomes the first do no harm to yourself. We wait until the very end and then add more stress to the stress. And I'll give an example here and then I'm going to pause and see how it feels like to you all. I have a business coach, and as I was going through something about 5 months ago, he really came forward and said, you need to have the strategies. You need to have protocols. And so we talked about, is this a red day, a yellow day, or a green day? So that, and sometimes those colors change. But that element of like, listen, if you recognize that you're in a red day for whatever reason, then you have your protocol. If it's a red day, and I'll share mine, it was you do two things, Kristen. You take a shower and you eat once, at least once. That's when I know it's a bad day because usually I'm eating all the time. But when I was really recognizing to kind of scan the landscape and say, this is a red day, take shower, eat. Okay. What if it's a yellow day? And then you get those protocols, those yes and. Here's where I am, and here's what is the closest, most critical available thing to me. And then a green day does not mean you do everything you normally do in a regular day, but it's more like, I feel like I could socialize. I feel like I could go to that. And really starting to think inward to yourself. Also to the fact that you kind of throw up that flag. If this is one of those red days, then you're immediately like, I need to cancel the social plans. This is going to be a takeout food day, or we're all eating cereal day. And when you get that sense of acknowledgement of like, oh, we're on a red day, then you minimize the decision tree. And in the course of our life, everything, there's research that says we make up to 35,000 decisions a day. And a lot of that's like, take the next step, turn left. But that cognitive overload that we talked about in the beginning, if you're on a red day, you're like bare minimums. So that's a component when you are in burnout and knowing that it's going to take a while, is to say, which day is this today? And it might change. You might be plugging along on a yellow and then something happens and you're in red. But it's that if this, then this. So that not in the moment we're sitting there being like, but now I have 6 more meetings I'm supposed to go to. It's that automatic like decision tree. We're now in red. So I used to work at Amazon and we called it out and to the left, which means you take things on your calendar and move them out into the future sides. And so a lot of it starts, and I think Libby and I had a conversation about this one time, about the permission to even have sub days where it's not 100%. And so if you or somebody that you're close to is really being able to identify, ooh, this is I'm not changing my clothes all day, because that alone allows some of that to just oxygenate. Thoughts on that before I go into some tactics around it?
It sounds like there's just a ton of wisdom around that, Kristin, because I think sometimes when we're having one of those off days and we don't give ourselves permission to offload stuff, we just wallow all day in this feeling of being overwhelmed. And wow, that's just a really great strategy to get that stuff off the plate so we don't feel horrible the whole day. That's just great.
Well, and simple doesn't mean easy. I mean, that's a true story in a lot of things. And we learned this during COVID. Or there's also been studies that talk about the amount of access people have, respectfully, Mark, to the news cycle and the levels of negative and positive components within that, because that is a feeder for it. But those elements I need to minimize whatever we're going to talk about sensory strategies here in a moment. But even the idea of identifying what's happening in the moment feels foreign at first, because we are a white knuckle culture of, we're just get her done. The customer always comes first, rise and slay. And it's a 24-hour cycle, all the more.